Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever looked at a masterpiece painting and thought, wow, that is genius? But then you see a child's drawing and think that is so creative too. Have you ever wondered if we even value these different kinds of creativity? The same way today we're diving into a fascinating study that explores whether we have a genius bias. When it comes to creativity, this research asks a big question: does our brain automatically lean towards thinking of bright, liant, world-changing creations when we hear the word creativity? Or can we also appreciate the small, everyday sparks of ingenuity? This study looked at how regular people, not just experts. Think about two ends of the creativity spectrum. On one side, you have the big C creativity like Shakespeare or Einstein, the truly groundbreaking stuff that changes the world. On the other side, you have mini C creativity, which is the everyday creativity we all experience, like finding a new way to solve a problem at work, or coming up with a funny story to tell your friends. The researchers wanted to know if people automatically prefer the big C genius stuff over the mini C everyday stuff. They brought in people from India, China, and the US to test this out, and guess what they found? It seems we do have a bias towards genius level creativity. So what exactly is creativity? It is basically the ability to come up with something new and useful. But the way we think about it can be really different. For a long time, people focused on the super famous genius creators, the big C ones. Think of someone like William Shakespeare, whose plays are still studied and performed centuries later. But then there's also the creativity that happens in our own lives, like a child writing their first poem. The researchers mentioned that even the famous psychologist Guilford, who really pushed for more creativity research, talked about both these levels. He said that creative acts, even small ones, can be expected from almost everyone. This idea of different levels of creativity has been developed into what is called the 4 C's model. Imagine it like a ladder of creativity. At the very bottom, you have mini C, which is your personal, in the moment creative insights. It is like that aha moment you have when you figure something out. If you share these ideas and others appreciate them, it moves up to little c. Many people are happy to express their creativity at this level, just for fun or for their local community. If you then become a professional and your work starts to make an impact in your field, you are moving towards pro C. And finally, at the very top, big C is for those rare individuals whose work has a massive, lasting impact on the world, like a Nobel Prize winner or a revolutionary artist. Now, the interesting thing is that how academics think about creativity isn't always the same as how everyday people think about it. And these everyday beliefs really matter. They can actually affect whether or not people choose to be creative themselves. Some people might even believe that creativity is only for a select few, a rare gift. But this study's findings suggest that while we might think that, we also perhaps unconsciously prefer the big, flashy achievements. The researchers here were really interested in both what people consciously say they believe about creativity and what their brains automatically associate with it. They call these explicit and implicit beliefs. Explicit beliefs are the ones you can easily talk about and explain, like saying, I think creativity is important. Implicit beliefs are more like gut feelings or automatic associations, and they often happen without us even realizing it. Think of it this way: explicit is like telling someone your favorite color, and implicit is like how quickly you reach for that color when you are picking out clothes without thinking. These different ways of thinking can sometimes line up and sometimes be completely different. So, to really get to the heart of it, the researchers decided to focus on those two extremes, the everyday mini C and the extraordinary big C. Their main question was this: do people have a genius bias, meaning a strong preference for big C over mini C creativity? They made some specific predictions. For instance, they expected people to be quicker at labeling big C art as creative and mini C art as mundane, when they took a special test called an implicit association test, or IAT. They also expected that when asked directly, people would rate big C creations as more creative than mini C ones. To figure this out, they gathered over 800 participants from 3 different countries: the United States, India, and China. This cross-cultural aspect is super important because people's ideas about creativity can be shaped by their culture. They collected a lot of information about the participants, like their age, gender, education level, and even their college major. One of the clever ways they tested this was using an implicit association test, or IAT. Imagine sorting cards into categories really fast. In this study, they had people sort images of famous paintings representing big C and children's paintings representing mini C, and pair them with words like creative or mundane. The faster people were at pairing famous paintings with creative words and children's paintings with mundane words, the more it suggested an implicit bias. It's like seeing how quickly your brain makes certain connections without you even trying to. Besides the IAT, they also asked participants to directly rate how creative they found various big C and mini C paintings on a scale. This gave them a clear picture of people's conscious opinions. They asked about things like whether the artworks were original, imaginative, or innovative versus boring, common, or typical. So what did they find? Well, the EIT results were pretty clear. Participants were indeed faster at associating famous paintings with creativity and children's paintings with mundanity. This supports the idea that we have an automatic leaning towards big C. When it came to direct ratings, the results also showed a significant difference. People rated the big C paintings as much more creative than the mini C paintings. This means that even when asked directly, people saw the genius-level art as more creative. This supports their hypothesis that people tend to rate big C art as more creative. But here is where things get a little more nuanced. When they asked people to explicitly link creativity to statements about big C versus mini C, participants were actually more likely to say they associated creativity with mini C. This is a bit of a puzzle. Why would people implicitly and explicitly prefer big C art, but then say they associate creativity more with mini C statements? The researchers also looked at something called creative self-efficacy, which is basically how confident people are in their own creative abilities. They found that people rated themselves higher on mini C self-efficacy than on big C self-efficacy. This makes sense. Most of us probably feel more confident about our everyday creative moments than we do about creating a masterpiece that will change the world. It suggests that people understand they are creative in their own way, but they also recognize that they're not at the level of a Da Vinci. And what about the cultural differences? They found that people from Eastern cultures showed a higher implicit genius bias compared to people from Western cultures. Those from Eastern cultures were also more likely to explicitly link creativity to big C and gave higher ratings to big C paintings. This suggests that cultural background can indeed influence how we perceive and value different levels of creativity. So, putting it all together, what does this mean? The study provides pretty strong evidence for a genius bias in how people perceive creativity, both when they're not consciously thinking about it and when they are asked directly. We tend to associate creativity more with those groundbreaking big C figures and creations. However, there is that interesting twist. When asked directly about what creativity feels like for them, people lean towards mini C and they feel more confident about their own everyday creativity. This discrepancy might be because we understand that big C is for the few, while mini C is something we can all participate in daily. Interestingly, the study also found that female participants were more likely to rate mini C work as creative. The researchers suggest this might be linked to traits often associated with women, like nurturing and emotional warmth, which are important for fostering creativity. This inconsistency between how we rate art and how we associate creativity with statements is a really key finding. It might be because the way we measure things matters. Looking at a painting uses different parts of our brain than reading and responding to a statement. The researchers also point out that the big C paintings they used were all from Western culture, which could have influenced how participants from different cultural backgrounds responded. Now, no study is perfect. The researchers themselves point out a few limitations. First, they weren't completely sure if it is a genius bias or just a more accurate evaluation, because frankly, Picasso probably is more creative than a 10-year-old. At least in terms of impact, they also noted that people might be more familiar with famous big C artworks, which could influence their ratings. It is also important to remember that the sample from India and China was smaller, and the US participants were mostly from one university. So it is hard to say these findings apply to everyone everywhere. They also didn't look at people's creative mindset, for example, whether having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset might change how they view creativity. In the end, this research gives us a fascinating peek into our minds. It suggests that while we appreciate and understand everyday creativity, our automatic associations, and even our direct ratings often lean towards the groundbreaking genius level achievements. It seems there is a genius preference, or perhaps a genius bias, baked into how we think about creativity. This doesn't mean we don't value mini C, but it does suggest that big C often takes center stage in our perception. The study reminds us that while genius is rare and impactful, the creativity we experience every day is also important and something we can feel more confident about. It's a great reminder to appreciate both the magnificent creations that shape our world and the small sparks of innovation that make our own lives richer. What do you think about these findings? Do you find yourself leaning towards big C or mini? See creativity? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the psychology of creativity, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Rubin's Mind Lab for more fascinating science breakdowns, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.